Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the grimy cobblestone alleys of 17th century London, where the smell alone could probably knock you unconscious. You stand on a damp, uneven street, ankle deep in slush and soot, with a sky so grey it looks like it gave up trying. Rats scurry between overflowing chamber pots, and someone is shouting something about turnips or maybe fire. But what really grabs your attention is the parade of dogs trotting by, leashed or not, prancing with a strange kind of purpose. Behind them march humans, scruffy, frowning and determined. These are not owners. They're not servants either. These are official dog walkers, licensed, paid, tracked, in a city where people barely had clean drinking water. Dogs somehow got themselves a union rep. You probably won't survive this place long, especially if you don't watch where you step so before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's up with us in the twilight hours. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the smoke-stained streets, dodging horse dung and tavern fights. And already you're wondering how any of this became about dogs. Well, dogs were everywhere. Big, shaggy ones loitering outside butcher stalls. Small yappers darting between skirts and boots. Mismatched mongrels curled in doorways. London's canine population in the 1600s was frankly out of control. But built in a city of 400,000 spalls end, what feels like 600,000 fleas dogs weren't just pets. They were workers, companions, status symbols, and sometimes dinner, if things got bad enough. And things got bad a lot. The city itself was a mess. Roads weren't paved properly. Sanitation laws were more like suggestions. People hurled waste from windows with a casual gardy-loo warning. And the rivers were basically liquid trash. Into this chaos padded dogs, dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands, depending on who you ask. Historians still argue whether most of these animals were privately owned or part of London's growing stray population. But one thing's clear: they needed managing, and that meant walking. Not for their benefit, but for everyone else's. At first, there were no rules. Dogs roamed where they pleased, chased carts, bit strangers, and sometimes formed loose packs that terrorized entire alleys. Bakers complained about their wares being snatched. Milkmaids had their pails toppled. Even the city watch occasionally found itself barked into retreat by a well-coordinated group of spaniels. And yes, that actually happened twice. So why not just lock them up? Well, here's the twist. Many of these dogs belonged to powerful people. Wealthy merchants, minor nobles, even foreign dignitaries. You couldn't just round up a French ambassador's dachshund because it pooped outside St. Paul's again. You needed tact, regulation, a system. That's when the idea started. Brewing, perhaps the dogs needed ... escorts. Professionals. Someone responsible who could, for a small fee, prevent dogs from getting into fights, knocking over barrels, or by mingling with the poor. These weren't just walks. They were public safety measures disguised as a service. You follow a hunched figure leading to spaniels down Bread Street. He's muttering to himself, a basket slung over one shoulder, an odd-looking brass badge pinned to his cloak. He's one of the earliest known dog walkers, though the title didn't exist yet. Locals just called him Old Goose, for reasons no one remembers. Every morning, Old Goose would collect the dogs of a few noble houses, walk them through predictable loops round the church and bakery, and return them smelling slightly less like a chimney than before. He was paid in coin, crusts, and occasionally wine. And his success inspired imitators. Soon, walking dogs became a small urban hustle. Young boys, old men, even former soldiers started offering their services. Some were reliable, others vanished. Mid-walk and sold the dog to a passing sailor. But as more and more people began turning this into a livelihood, city officials took notice. If people were going to be paid to escort noble animals through the streets, then by heavens, there ought to be rules and fees and licenses. This is how it all started, not from love of dogs, but from love of order and, unsurprisingly, revenue. The City of London, always eager to find new ways to monetize human suffering and now animal chaos, began drafting what would become a bizarre new regulation, official certification for dog-walkers. And yes, some historians still argue whether this licensing began as a public health measure or a thinly veiled form of class protection. Because let's be real, only certain dogs got walked. The lapdogs of merchants, the hunting hounds of landed gentry, the street mutts. They still roamed free, dodging kicks and nipping meat pies when no one looked. You pause at the entrance to a crooked alley where a chalkboard advertises reliable walker-nor bites since May. Below it is a handprint, probably dipped in soot or something worse. Word of mouth was everything. If your dog came back with fewer legs than it left with, that walker was out of business. Reputation mattered, and in a city teetering on the edge, play, rebellion, and bad plumbing. It turns out dog walkers might have been one of the few things holding society together, leash by leash, pawprint by pawprint. As the 17th century trudged on, this strange profession began to evolve. Some walkers used wooden carts to carry smaller breeds. Others employed helpers to comb dogs mid-walk, keeping fleas from spreading, and a few even carried crude journals noting each dog's temperament, favorite route, and number of daily ... deposits. People started talking, not just about their dogs, but about which walker you used, and whether he was licensed. Because yes, soon the city would require papers, an actual license, stamped and recorded, to walk someone else's dog through public streets. The kind of detail that sounds fake until you realize that back then, owning a goose required a permit in some parishes. So dogs, entire parades of regulations. So now you're here, following the rise of something oddly familiar in our modern world. Professional pet services. except with more fleas, no soap, and about a 50% chance someone throws a potato at you. And this is only the beginning. You keep walking deeper into London's tangled streets, where the air is thick with smoke and the constant clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestones. But it's not just people and carts causing the chaos. Dogs are everywhere, and they're a problem nobody quite knows how to solve yet. London's dog population is exploding thanks to a mix of factors: growing human numbers, lack of animal control, and a city that's just too crowded to care. You try not to trip over a pair of yapping terriers chasing a rat, but it's tough when dogs run wild in every nook and cranny. The barking problem is real, and not just an annoying background noise. It's disrupting everything. Nighttime is no quieter than the day dogs howl at the moon, fight over scraps, and wake up every poor soul who dares to sleep in a room without a lock. Shopkeepers complain about dogs tipping over barrels of beer or knocking down baskets of fish. The smell is something else entirely, a mixture of wet fur, dung, and city grime that sticks to your nostrils long after you leave. Some neighborhoods are worse than others. In the East End, dogs roam in packs, making the streets feel more like wilderness than urban sprawl. The wealthy tend to keep their dogs indoors or closely supervised, while the poorer districts have mutts scrambling for scraps and safety. Historians still argue whether the city's dog problem was mostly about stray animals or just unregulated pet ownership. But everyone agrees it caused headaches for the city leaders. The city tried to respond with a mix of strange and sometimes brutal measures. There were fines for loose dogs, but enforcement was patchy at best, mostly because the city watch was busy enough chasing thieves and drunkards. Worse, there were occasional calls to cull dogs altogether, though these suggestions mostly came from folks who didn't own any. The tension between dog lovers and dog haters simmered under the surface, like a pot about to boil over. You overhear a merchant grumble about how his prize bulldog was attacked by a common mongrel near the market. His tone is equal parts outrage and fear, because losing a dog back then wasn't just emotionally, was financial. Some dogs were trained for hunting or guarding and cost fortunes. Others were the only companions for lonely widows or elderly gentlemen. It's no surprise, then, that people started paying others to keep an eye on their animals, especially as the city grew busier and more dangerous. But the booming dog population had a darker side, too. With so many animals packed into narrow streets, disease spread quickly, fleas and ticks flourished, and the fear of plague-carrying insects made everyone itchy and paranoid. You scratch at an invisible bite on your neck and think about how some Londoners believed dogs could carry the plague itself, though scholars still debate whether this fear was based on any real science or just medieval superstition. In response, some neighborhoods enacted early forms of animal control. Certain streets had rules about when and where dogs could roam. But compliance was voluntary and, frankly, laughed at by most. You see a sign painted on a wall reading, "No dogs passed." this point after sundown, but judging by the snarling mutt slinking under it, it might as well have been written in invisible ink. Dog walking started as a practical solution amid this chaos. It was less about pampering pets and more about controlling where and when dogs moved. If someone was paid to take a dog out for a walk, the city could at least keep an eye on where these animals were going. Of course, not all dog walkers were licensed yet. Some were opportunists, rounding up strays for a quick coin or abandoning dogs when the going got tough. But it was a start. And it wasn't just about control. Dog B also served as informal protectors, keeping watch over the animals from thieves or worse. Dog napping was a real risk, especially for expensive breeds. You wouldn't want to be the one explaining to your noble employer why their prized spaniel showed up missing an ear or worse. Not at all. That's when the first unofficial rules about walking routes and times began to take shape. Walkers had to know their way around and keep dogs away from trouble or face losing their job. The dog walking job market grew quickly. Young apprentices learned the ropes by shadowing experienced walkers. Older men found new purpose escorting smaller breeds. Veterans with no other work offered steady hands and quiet patience. You imagine these men walking side by side on London's twisting lanes, their charges tugging and barking, forming a moving, noisy parade through the city. Licensing wasn't far behind. If you were going to pay someone to be responsible for your dog in a city like London, you'd want some proof they weren't going to let Fido run off with a milkman's shoes or into the Thames. And so the city began formalizing the role, first with simple badges or tokens, later with actual guild membership and oaths. Of course, as you might expect, not everyone was thrilled with this new profession. Some barked that dog walking was a pointless luxury for the rich, while others saw it as a necessary evil in a city running wild. Poets and playwrights sneered, mocking dog walkers as hangers-on or petty bureaucrats. But the truth was more complicated and far more human. Historians still argue whether the dog problem pushed London to licensing, or if the licenses were more about controlling the city's working classes. But one thing remains clear: the city's barking problem was a loud, smelly symptom of bigger struggles: urban growth, poverty, public health, and the endless quest for order. You step aside as a dog walker passes by, leash in hand, badge shining faintly under a patch of weak sunlight. Behind him trails a procession of dogs, from fierce mastiffs to delicate lapdogs, all moving together in a strange harmony. It's not elegant, but it works for now. You trail behind a ragged group of teenagers and half-blind veterans, all hustling through the streets with dogs of every size in tow. This is the dawn of the dog-walking hustler peculiar job market, born from necessity, creativity, and a pinch of desperation. In a city bursting at the seams and smelling worse than a rotting fish stall, folks needed ways to survive. Some found odd jobs as chimney sweeps or night watchmen. Others discovered that walking dogs, especially for those who could pay, offered steady coin. These early dog walkers come from all walks of life. Young boys fresh from the workhouse, trying to stay out of trouble. Former soldiers, missing limbs, but not grit. Elderly men who couldn't dig ditches anymore, but still had the patience to handle a yapping pack. You notice how the job requires a blend of skills. Patience for the nervous, strength for the unruly, and a sharp eye to spot trouble before it starts. At times, dog walking was more like dog herding. You watch as one walker struggles to keep a scruffy hound from lunging at a passing cart. Another tries to untangle leashes that have somehow formed a knot worthy of the Tower of London's prison cells. The job sounds simpler than it is. Imagine managing a dozen dogs with different moods, sizes, and levels of cleanliness on a street where every other passerby either hates or fears you. But for some, it was honest work. They earned enough to pay rent in cramped tenements, buy a meal that wasn't just bread and dripping, and maybe even afford a pint at the local tavern. Dog owners, especially the wealthier ones, relied on these walkers more and more, trusting them to keep their animal out of harm's way, at least out of public scandal. Still, not all walkers had good reputations. Some were known for cutting corners, skipping routes, abandoning dogs during storms, or worse, selling dogs to sailors or foreign buyers when the money was right. Dog napping wasn't just a crime. It was an underground economy, and with few city controls in place, these rogue walkers thrived in the shadows. What's more, the job market itself was fiercely competitive. Newcomers faced hazing from seasoned walkers, and those without licenses or guild backing found themselves pushed to the city's edges. You hear rumors of walker gangs forming tight-knit crews, protecting their routes and clients like territorial hounds. Rivalries sometimes erupted into scuffles, with dog leashes flying and curses exchanged. You glimpse a pale youth, barely 15, earning a few pennies by fetching and carrying dogs through narrow alleys. He looks worn, but there's pride in his eyes, the kind that comes from carving out a niche in a city that otherwise forgets you exist. For many, dog walking wasn't glamorous, but it offered a sliver of dignity and purpose. Historians still debate how organized this early dog-walking scene truly was before official licensing. Was it a loose collection of individuals scraping by, or a more structured underground profession with unspoken rules and codes? The truth probably lies somewhere in between, shaped by local customs, neighborhood politics, and survival instincts. Interestingly, some dog walkers took on more than just the dogs. They acted as informal news bearers, relaying messages between households, or even acting as unofficial neighborhood watchmen with their constant patrols. They saw the comings and goings of the city's denizens, the brewing conflicts, and sometimes the quiet moments of kindness. You imagine how these humble walkers became part of the city's fabric, silent threads weaving through London's chaotic tapestry. The emergence of dog walking as a job also reflects shifting social attitudes. Dogs were no longer just beasts, bird of burden or pests. They were companions deserving care and respect. For the rich, this meant proper exercise and grooming. For the poor, perhaps a chance to earn a bit of money by caring for others' pets. It's a subtle shift, but one with echoes that ripple through time. So here you are, watching as the city's first dog walkers carve out their strange, smelly niche. A job born from chaos, survival, and a little bit of love for creatures both furry and feisty. And while their stories might never make the history books, their paw prints are forever stamped on the streets of London. The scene shifts to you standing in front of a bustling guild hall, where the first inklings of official dog-walking regulation take root. The city of London, desperate for some semblance of order in the dog chaos, begins experimenting with licensing dog walkers, and idea that sounds sensible but quickly becomes as complicated as untangling a pack of snarling terriers. You can almost hear the grumbles from the city council. How do we even prove who's qualified to walk a dog? One clerk might have muttered, balancing a quill and a half-empty tankard of ale. The solution, a license proof that a walker knew their way around city streets, could handle a variety of dogs, and wouldn't let Fido cause mayhem on the King's Highway. It was a simple idea, yet revolutionary for its time. Licensing started as a patchwork effort. Different wards experimented with their own versions, some requiring a fee, others demanding a quick exam or character reference. Few imagine the scenes. Hopeful dog walkers lining up to pay their dues, clutching ragged leashes and calling cards, while skeptical officials inspected their credentials, wondering if a badge was really going to keep London's dog problem at bay. But the licenses were more than just paper. They became symbols of responsibility and status. To carry a license was to say, I'm trusted. It gave walkers a sense of pride and helped weed out the worst offenders, the ones who'd disappear with a dog for a few coins, or let their charges run wild in taverns. This was also the time when dog walking began to gain the attention of the public imagination. Satirical cartoons and pamphlets poked fun at the licensed dog walker, portraying them as bumbling, leash-wielding clowns in oversized hats. Some called it a dog's circus or a leash on the leash. Of course, these jabs came mostly from the upper classes who saw dog walking as a lowly, almost laughable profession. Historians still argue whether these early licenses were genuinely effective or mostly performative gestures to appease an increasingly frustrated populace. The reality probably falls somewhere in between. Licenses brought a bit more order, but London's dog problem remained stubbornly persistent. You overhear whispers of the first dog-walking guild forming, an idea inspired by the city's older guilds for trades like blacksmithing and weaving. A formal guild meant more than just licensing it, meant shared rules, training, and enforcement. Members could support each other, settle disputes, and maintain a reputation. If a walker lost a dog or caused a scandal, the guild might demand restitution or exile. The guild also took on a quasi-policing role, sometimes deputizing its members to report strays or enforce leash laws. You imagine a guild hall filled with grizzled men, each telling tales of unruly dogs and close calls with angry merchants. Somewhere amidst the smoke and candles, the future of dog walking was being shaped, part trade, part watchdog, part city service. Not everyone welcomed these changes, naturally. Some walkers preferred the freedom of the streets without guild oversight. They saw licenses and guilds as unnecessary shackles, limiting their earning potential and independence. This tension played out like a silent tug-of-war through the alleys and taverns of London. Meanwhile, the city government began passing laws tied to the licensing system. Owners were required to pay fees and register their dogs, creating official lists and sometimes ID tags. These bureaucratic moves aimed to track ownership, reduce strays, and hold walkers accountable. It's a precursor to modern dog licensing, but with plenty of quirks and gaps. You smile at the idea of Londoners crowding city halls, trying to remember their dogs' names, or proving ownership without photos or microchips. Instead, they relied on descriptions, scars, or temperaments. It's a far cry from today's chip scanners, but it set the stage, curiously. The licensing system also intersected with other city issues: public health, taxation, and social control. Dog licenses brought in revenue, which some argued helped fund street cleaning or animal control officers. Others saw it as another way to monitor the city's poorer residents, who often struggled to pay fees or meet requirements. And so, the licensed dog walker became a fixture of 17th century London, not just a person walking a dog, but a symbol of a city grappling with growth, regulation, and the chaos of everyday life. You imagine them passing by your window, badges gleaming faintly in the twilight, leashes clutched tightly, ready to face whatever the streets threw their way. You follow the trail of London's licensed dog walkers into the social underbelly, where their work intersects with the city's sharp divisions between rich and poor, order and chaos, compassion and neglect. Dog ownership wasn't just a pastime, it was a status symbol. The wealthier classes flaunted finely bred spaniels and setters, while the poor made do with scrappy mutts. The rise of licensed dog walkers both reflected and intensified these class distinctions. Imagine a sprawling townhouse on a quiet street, where a noblewoman commands her loyal dog to be taken for a walk. The dog walker is punctual, well-dressed in a modest but neat coat, bearing the city's license with pride. His job is clear: keep the dog safe, away from gutters, rats, and the noisy market crowds, and return on time. For him, this steady gig means a few shillings that could fill a stomach or pay a rent installment. For the noblewoman, it's a luxury. That signals her standing. Contrast this with a rowdy pub in the East End, where an unlicensed boy races through crowded alleys, juggling a couple of dogs tied to a rope. His dogs are wild-eyed, their coats ragged and smells pungent. No license here, no guild backing, just hustle and hope. If caught, he might face a fine or worse. His job isn't about prestige, it's survival. Historians still debate how widespread licensed dog walking really was among London's poor? Was it an accessible trade, or mostly limited to middle class and above? The truth is complex. While guilds and licensing offered structure, much of the real dog walking happened informally, in shadowy corners. Unregulated and unrecorded, dog walkers often became unexpected social mediators, bridging the city's divides in their daily rounds. They mingled with nobles and merchants, laborers and thieves, overhearing secrets and gossip. Some earned reputations as trustworthy figures, others as troublemakers or informants. They knew where to avoid and where to linger, balancing the whims of dogs and humans alike. Public health concerns also played a role in the dog-walking scene's class dynamics. Wealthy owners demanded cleaner streets and safer routes, pushing city officials to crack down on strays and enforce leash laws. Poor neighborhoods, already overburdened with disease and poverty, struggled to comply. Licensed dog walkers, caught in the middle, navigated these tensions daily. The financial aspect wasn't just about fees. Licensed dog walkers sometimes offered extras, grooming, feeding, or even training. You chuckle imagining 17th century versions of doggy daycare, minus the fluffy couches and Instagram selfies. These add-ons made a difference sexually for wealthy clients eager to keep their pets pampered. Yet, the economic opportunities for dog walkers were precarious. Illness, injury, or a single lost dog could spell ruin. The guild tried to offer support, but there were limits. No insurance, no safety net. It was a tough life with unpredictable income, and many dog walkers remained on society's margins. Still, the profession opened paths otherwise closed. Some dog walkers parlayed their skills into other trades, kennel management, animal breeding, or even roles within city services. A few managed to rise above their stations, gaining respect and stability in a world that rarely offered either. You imagine the daily rhythms of these walkers. Lives, early mornings, navigating foggy streets. Afternoons, dodging market crowds. Evenings, trading stories over ale. Their stories rarely reach history books, but they're stitched into the fabric of London's growth and change. The licensed dog walker was more than a curious historical footnote. They embodied the city's contradictions, order and disorder, wealth and poverty, affection and frustration. And as you picture one walking down the dim, gaslit street, leash in hand, you realize their legacy lives on every time a dog gets its daily walk. You find yourself in the bustling markets of London, where dog walkers are more than just pet attendants there, players in a lively underground economy that sometimes crosses into the downright strain. While dog walking was often a straightforward service, the city's complexities meant walkers got tangled in all kinds of unusual side hustles, some more legal than others. Take dog napping, for example, not exactly the kind of canine kidnapping you'd expect today, but a real issue back then. Some rogue dog walkers, desperate for cash or opportunistic, would borrow dogs, hoping to sell them to sailors, traders, or even foreign collectors who prized English breeds. The black market for dogs was surprisingly active, with pups changing hands under cover of night or disguised as strays. You might smirk, imagining a scrappy terrier ending up halfway across Europe thanks to a crooked walker dog. Then there's the odd role of dog walkers as messengers. In a city where letter writing and communication were slow and sometimes risky, walkers took advantage of their regular routes to deliver notes, parcels, or secret messages tucked into collars or pockets. Some historians speculate that this courier role might have overlapped with espionage, with walkers passing intelligence between factions, especially during politically turbulent times. But of course, historians still argue whether these were isolated incidents or a more widespread practice. You notice how dog walkers could also serve as unofficial inspectors of neighborhoods. With their eyes on the streets, they reported suspicious activity or unclean conditions to authorities, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes under pressure. This quasi-policing role helped city officials manage the ever-growing urban sprawl and its challenges. There was also a more eccentric side to dog-walking business. Some walkers offered dog charms or folk remedies to ease pets' anxieties or ward off diseases. Others claimed to have special knowledge of canine diets or exercise routines, promoting cures for common ailments. You might chuckle thinking about a walker selling miracle ointments made from dubious ingredients, perhaps a bit of old cockroach, dust, or some rare herb found in the city's gardens. The role of licensed dog walkers in public health took pay on particular importance as plague outbreaks threatened London. Keeping dogs from roaming freely reduced the spread of fleas and disease. The city council encouraged walkers to ensure animals didn't become carriers of contagion, though enforcement was spotty. Dog owners sometimes resisted these regulations, especially if they interfered with their pets' routines or freedom. At the same time, the growing importance of licensed dog walkers revealed London's evolving attitudes toward animals. Dogs were no longer just tools or pests, but companions requiring care and protection. Walkers helped bridge this shift, acting as caretakers and advocates in a time when few laws protected animal welfare. You imagine how dog walkers navigated these shifting roles, balancing their duties with economic survival and social expectations. The profession was never static. It adapted to the city's rhythms and needs, reflecting broader changes in London's society and culture. In fact, dog walking as a trade offers a fascinating window into early modern urban life where commerce, speculation, and daily survival intertwined in the most unexpected ways. It's a reminder that even the most mundane jobs can reveal rich stories when you look close enough. Thus the decades pass. You begin to notice how the licensed dog walker's role subtly shifts with London's expanding urban landscape. The city's streets grow more crowded and diverse, and so to do the challenges faced by those tasked with managing canine chaos. New laws emerge, aimed at taming the wild dog population and maintaining public order, some more effective than others. One such law is the infamous dog tax, a a fee imposed on dog owners, supposedly to help fund the city's cleanup efforts and control strays. Paying the tax becomes a badge of responsibility, and licensed dog walkers often act as enforcers, collecting fees or reporting unpaid dues. You might smirk, imagining a walker sneaking round with a ledger, keeping track of which dogs had been paid for and which hadn't. But not all Londoners took kindly to these taxes. Many evaded payments, or simply hid their dogs, leading to a cat-and-mouse game between owners, walkers, and city officials. This cat-and-mouse chase sometimes escalated into heated confrontations, with walkers caught in the middle, trying to uphold their licenses while avoiding the ire of disgruntled owners. At the same time, the rise of coffee houses and public gardens create new dog-walking hotspots where social classes mix and mingle under the watchful eyes of licensed walkers. These green spaces become informal meeting points for both people and their dogs, offering a reprieve from the muddy, crowded street. It's easy to picture a group of walkers exchanging gossip and sharing tips amid the scent of freshly brewed coffee and blooming roses. This period also sees a rise in public fascination with dog breeds and canine behavior. Pamphlets and books circulate on how to care for dogs properly, and some licensed walkers gain reputations as canine experts or dog whisperers. Their advice ranges from practical tips on leash training to more curious beliefs, like the idea that certain breeds bring luck or ward off evil spirits, a notion still debated among historians. You chuckle recalling earlier tales of dog charms, and wonder if some of these superstitions persisted or evolved. After all, people often clung to old beliefs, especially when dealing with animals whose behavior could seem mysterious or unpredictable. Meanwhile, licensed dog walkers grapple with competition from unlicensed operators who sometimes undercut prices or ignored regulations altogether. This rivalry occasionally sparked tension or outright conflict, with guilds lobbying city officials for stricter enforcement. These power struggles added a new layer of complexity to the dog-walking trade. The profession's evolution also intersects with the city's growing awareness of public health and sanitation. Dog walkers were sometimes enlisted in campaigns to keep streets cleaner or to report stray animals suspected of carrying disease. Their licenses weren't just about legality, they were marks of trust and responsibility, vital in a city struggling with recurring plagues and unsanitary conditions. Historians still debate how effective these measures were, or whether they mainly served to reinforce social hierarchies. After all, the poorest neighborhoods often bore the brunt of these regulations, while wealthier districts enjoyed cleaner streets and better enforcement. Through it all, the image of the licensed dog walker becomes both familiar and emblematic of London's attempts to balance growth, order, and everyday chaos. They're not just walkers, they're early urban planners, social mediators, and unsung caretakers of the city's furry inhabitants. And as you picture one of them guiding a pack through a foggy dawn street, leash in hand and license pinned proudly to their chest, you feel a quiet appreciation for the strange, winding history that brought us here. You wake to the distant sound of hooves on cobblestone and the echo of barking dogs as London eases into the 18th century. The city is evolving rapidly, its skyline pierced by the spires of new churches and the chimneys of ever-expanding industry. Amid this transformation, the role of the licensed dog walker doesn't vanish, it adapts now. Dog walking is no longer just a necessity for wealthy households or a service for the overworked merchant. It's becoming, strangely enough, something fashionable. The more refined parts of London's St. James's Mayfair, Bloomsbury begin to see dog walkers as genteel assistants to high society. Their clients parade through Hyde Park and along the River Thames, showing off both dog and walker-like extensions of their own taste. Bow, and you, walking beside them in your mind's eye, begin to notice a growing air of professionalism among these city-bound companions. Some walkers now wear tailored coats with brass buttons, not just for warmth, but as a symbol of their licensure. They carry whistles, engraved nameplates, or small notebooks where client requests are written in spidery cursive. Their tools, leather leashes, grooming brushes, and boots that survive even the sloppiest Alizar marks of a new seriousness, bend their craft. You catch a whiff of lavender oil on their coats, used to keep the dogs calm and impress the owners. A particularly curious moment arises when the Guild of Dog Walkers petitions the city to recognize dog walking as a distinct and protected occupation, separate from general street labor. Their argument: they handle animals with discipline, represent the city's decorum, and uphold public health. Historians still argue whether this petition led to formal change or simply fizzled out under other pressing urban matters, like food shortages and housing reform. What's not debated is how organized the walkers had become. Some offered loyalty programs, walk 10 times, and the next is free, even left small calling cards in homes after their walk, complete with charming remarks like Milo was in a jolly mood today, but did chase a baker's boy near Cornhill. The economic structure around dog walking became more complex too. Some affluent walkers subcontracted younger apprentices, often teenagers from working-class families, teaching them the roots, dog handling, and how to behave properly in front of clients. These apprenticeships were informal, but valuable, were a way into a reliable, if modest, livelihood. And yes, that meant more bureaucracy, as the guilds tried to regulate the growing labor chain. At the same time, London's population was surging. More people meant more dogs, and more dogs meant more problems. Stray populations ballooned again, partly due to lax enforcement of licensing rules. You picture overburdened walkers weaving through the chaos, dodging carts, sidestepping piles, beat of filth, and navigating the shrill politics of neighbors, accusing each other of harboring unlicensed pets. And then there were the walkers who went rogue. Some turned to selling dogs to make extra coin, particularly exotic or rare breeds, which could fetch a week's wages. Others acted as early pet detectives, tracking down stolen animals for a fee. The city was a labyrinth, and who better to navigate it than someone who walked it every day with ears open and eyes alert. Dog walkers were also drawn into the city's increasing obsession with performance and spectacle. You might stumble upon a dog walker who, after hours trained, bear charges to perform tricks in tavern courtyards or on market stages. These canine vaudeville acts, while rare, were popular enough to earn extra pocket change and the occasional invitation from a noble who wanted private entertainment for their guests. What remains consistent through it all is the walker's peculiar visibility seen everywhere, yet rarely acknowledged in official records. They lived on the edge of London's attention, familiar yet forgettable. Much like the dogs they guided, you imagine, just for a moment, being one of them. The city is humming. It's early morning, and the fog is just lifting from the Thames. You tie your scarf, check your brass badge, and listen for the first bark of the day. The leash tugs gently in your hand, and off you go. As you stroll deeper into the 18th century city, you notice a new figure rising alongside the licensed dog walker, the animal trainer, with Londoners growing more fascinated by animal behavior. The line between a walker and a trainer begins to blur. This era is one of demonstration and discipline where even the most stubborn spaniel might be expected to sit, stay, and shake paws on command. Dog walkers find themselves adapting again. Some now tout their services not just as walkers but as canine. They begin to advertise their ability to curb barking, end thorough chewing, and even settle a dog's bad temper with a few well-timed gestures and firm but gentle commands. You imagine one such walker, call him Samuel, who claims he can make any dog behave in just 1 week. He's got a small following, a book of testimonials, and even a hand-sewn sash that reads, "Modestly, Whisperer of the City Hounds." But, of course, not everyone agrees on technique. Some historians argue this was a golden age of humane pet care. Others point to darker methods, tethers soaked in vinegar to discourage biting, collars with bells meant to startle and confuse. The debate continues. Were these early trainers progressive or simply products of a society obsessed with control? Whatever the method, one thing is clear. Dog walkers are no longer just walkers. They're educators, behaviorists, sometimes even therapists to their four-legged clients. And in a city where a misbehaving dog could mean embarrassment or damage, that made them more valuable than ever. Meanwhile, the streets themselves are shifting. With industrial growth comes more noise, more danger steam carts, clattering machinery, crowded sidewalks. Dog walkers must be more alert, more agile. Some even start carrying little first aid satchels, bandages, vinegar, biscuit or two, in case of emergency. You picture the absurdity of a spaniel fleeing from a startled horse, dragging its poor walker into a fishmonger's stall, overturning buckets and splashing herring across the cobbles, laughter, shouting, and somewhere in the chaos, a pair of children squealing with delight. It's moments like these that make the city feel alive and unpredictable. licensing requirements begin to expand. By now, walkers need not only a badge, but a signed reference, a clean criminal record, and proof of apprenticeship in some districts. The profession is becoming more formalized, even bureaucratic. There's paperwork. There are forms. You can almost hear the quill scratching through yet another dog description. Medium-sized. One floppy ear responds to Buttercup. And yet, beneath the regulations and routines, there's still that flicker of mischief. Some walkers develop coded whistle-short bursts that mean turn left, long tones for stop. A few even swear their dogs understand entire routes and can walk them unaccompanied. It's hard to know whether to believe them, but you smile at the thought. A clever mutt trotting through Cheapside, leash dragging behind, stopping at every corner as though trained by the stars. Of course, not all changes are charming. Some owners grow more demanding, turning walkers into status servants. They dictate routes, restrict interaction with lower-class dogs, and expect daily reports written with obsessive detail. You wonder if the poor walker ever dreamed that one day they'd be ranking the quality of a dog's bowel movement in elegant script. Yet even as expectations grow heavier, so too does community respect. Many dog walkers are known by names. They are waved at, spoken to, even tipped during holidays. One or two become local celebrities in their own quiet way. People point them out as the one who walks the mayor's pug or the chap who tamed Lady Blythe's bloodhound. Historians still argue whether these walkers were ever truly accepted as professionals, or whether they remained perched at the margins of proper society. What's certain is that they endured navigating a city of shifting rules and rising noise with a leash in one hand, a sharp eye on the other, and shoes forever muddied from the day before. And as you watch them disappear down yet another Fogsworth lane, you realize you've come to admire them not just for their dedication, but for how they carried on through it all, step after step, tail after wagging tail. The 18th century lurches toward its close, and you find yourself walking alongside the dog walkers as London begins to creak under the weight of the Industrial Revolution. The soot is thick in the air now, mixing with chimney smoke and the tang of iron. The old rhythms of the city, the gentle clip-clop of hooves, the chatter of street sellers, increasingly drowned out by the grinding roar of machinery. And through it all, dog walkers persist, adjusting to a world that never stops hurrying, with factories sprouting like mushrooms and the population ballooning. London's pace accelerates. Dog walkers are pulled into new kinds of arrangements. Working 12-hour shifts begin relying on them not just for afternoon strolls, but for entire stretches of the day. You might spot a walker managing 3 or 4 animals from separate households, weaving between carts and washing lines with something like grace. This is also when walkers begin to form informal, networks little groups that meet before dawn, share route maps, and occasionally trade clients if one of them falls ill or moves neighborhoods. These weren't quite unions, but they had union-like energy, a quiet sense of solidarity among those whose jobs were ignored, yet indispensable. You imagine one such circle gathered near a baker's stall, drinking weak coffee and swapping stories about misbehaving spaniels and mysterious ankle-biters. Meanwhile, wealthier owners demand new forms of sophistication. They want walkers who can not only control their animals, but who can also offer weekly grooming, minor training, and even companionship as emotional support for dogs left alone too often in drafty homes. Some walkers begin learning animal massage, herbal calming methods, and how to read early signs of canine illness. There's a pride in this specialization. Licensed now carries more weight, more dignity. Of course, there's pushback too. Some think all this fuss over dogs is ridiculous. Satirical pamphlets circulate with cartoons of pampered pups in waistcoats or walkers holding parasols over bulldogs to shield them from drizzle. One memorable print shows a dog being fed roast beef from a silver fork while the walker stands. Nearby towel draped over one arm like a butler. You smirk, you've seen that exact brand of British sarcasm before. The pamphlet might have been silly, but it reflected real debate. Historians still argue whether the growing affection for dogs at this time marked a genuine cultural shift or was just another symptom of elite indulgence. Were the middle and upper classes really becoming more compassionate toward animals, or were dogs just another ornament to display their wealth and leisure? Regardless, dog walkers found themselves caught in that contradiction. They were both servants and caregivers, both practical laborers and emotional surrogates. They knew which dogs hated rain, which ones barked at chimney sweeps, which ones needed to sniff precisely the third lamppost on every walk or else. Throw a dramatic tantrum halfway down Bishopsgate. Their knowledge became quietly powerful. Some owners began leaving notes, asking for their dog's opinion. Does Jasper seem melancholy? Do you think Lady Pickleton's pug is bullying ours? Walkers replied with patient, handwritten updates, soft and surprisingly detailed. Potch in the absence of reliable veterinary care. A skilled walker was sometimes the closest thing to a canine psychologist you could find. Yet not all clients were gentle. Some demanded perfection. One poor walker was dismissed after a small terrier returned with a muddy paw. Another let go because a Labrador appeared less bouncy than usual. You say some things never change. And then there were the true characters. Walkers who sang to their dogs. Walkers who gave them noble titles. Sir Wolfingham III and Countess Fluffpaw. One man was known for narrating his entire walk aloud, giving each dog a speaking role in an ongoing soap opera that unfolded across London's streets. Were they eccentric? Certainly. But they also made the city feel more alive, more human and more dog-dash like Dot. As this era closes, the streets grow dirtier, the air thicker, and the pace ever more frantic. But the licensed dog walker remains muddy boots, gloved hands, leather leash curled like a question mark in one fist. They walk not for the glory, nor for riches, but for a rhythm that is older than industry, and more loyal than commerce, and bio in them silently now, through lamplight and soot. realize something simple but true. Some jobs don't need to be heroic to be honorable. They just need to be done with heart. You drift with the growing fog into the early 19th century, where the gaslights flicker over slick cobbles and factory whistles pierce the stillness like impatient clock hands. London is louder, dirtier, more packed than ever yet nestled in the routine chaos. Your eyes return to a humble figure, a person wrapped in a long coat, a dog at either side, threading through alley and avenue. The licensed dog walker hasn't vanished. They've merely changed coats again. This is the age of empire and expansion, but it's also an age of pets becoming truly family. Middle-class households swell thanks to colonial wealth and domestic industry. And dogs, especially smaller breeds like pugs, spaniels, and terriers, become common sights in parlors and sitting rooms. The once upper-class luxury of owning a dog now trickles down into more modest homes, and that means demand for dog walkers explodes. It's not just about the landed gentry anymore, it's about the banker's clerk, the retired military man, the dressmaker with a little fluff ball named Daisy, who simply must get her air. You imagine yourself tagging along with one such walker, perhaps. Her name is Clara, who has 6 regular clients and knows each dog's preferences like a script. Rupert, the retriever, enjoys puddles but hates chimneys. Belle, the Pomeranian, will only go clockwise around the square. And Jock, well, Jock needs a firm voice and 3 extra biscuits if there's even a hint of rain dot. With the rise in demand comes competition, and competition means flair. Walkers begin to differentiate themselves. Some advertise via printed cards tucked under doors or nailed to neighborhood boards. Others wear distinct hats or carry signature walking sticks to be more easily recognized. Clara wears a violet scarf with a tiny brass paw-print brooch, a quiet badge of reliability in a city of noise. And yet, with all this professionalism comes risk. The city is now clogged with cold dust carts and unfamiliar immigrants seeking labor, which stirs fear and resentment among older residents. Dog walkers, often hired across class lines, must navigate both literal and social minefields. There are neighborhoods where they're welcomed with smiles and tips, and others where suspicion clings like soot. This is also when more sinister tales begin to circulate. Dogs stole mid-walk, ransomed or resold. Cases where walkers disappeared, some say lured into alleyway traps, others say vanished willingly for better work in America. Historians still argue whether these disappearances were symptoms of a deeper criminal network or merely the chaos of a city expanding too fast for its own good. To combat all this, formal rules begin to solidify. In wealthier districts, homeowners associations insist on verifiable walkers, background checks, and signatures on collection sheets. Some demand that walkers carry paper logs showing which dogs were walked, for how long, and on which streets. You picture Clara balancing a leash in one hand and a pencil in the other, scribbling walked Daisy from 4:15 to 5 o'clock reluctant near dustbin. A few walkers even begin coordinating with local constables, alerting them to suspicious behavior or strange patterns. In return, they're granted quiet respect, even occasional favors, a place to warm their hands, a warning when a bad landlord's about. Slowly, walkers become unofficial eyes and ears of the neighborhoods they traverse. But for all their utility, they're still mostly invisible in formal records. No census listing for professional dog walker. No guild. Wages posted in public ledgers. They exist in the same gray space. They always have part service, part shadow, ever present and somehow always just out of view. Still, their influence leaves subtle traces. In children's stories, you find the gentle walker who helps lost puppies. Poem, in a city planner's notes, a mention of widening paths in certain parks to better accommodate dog handlers. And in journals, diaries, and gossip columns, they flicker to life mentioned fondly or mockingly, but always there. And through it all, they keep walking, past iron railings and steamy windows, past shoeshine boys and laundry lines, past flower carts and chimney sweeps. The rhythm remains the steady tug of a leash, the patter of paws, the city humming around them like a giant, restless kennel. You walk behind Clara now as the lamps blink on one by one. Her scarf trails behind her, buys her boots splash through shallow puddles, and the dogs trot contentedly beside her, knowing the path by heart. She turns once perhaps she senses your gazing, then disappears into the evening fog, part of London itself. The fog gives way to something brighter, Victorian sunlight, filtered through soot and ambition. You're in the heart of the 19th century, when Queen Victoria rules an empire, and all of London seems to be reinventing itself. Gaslights line the boulevards, steam trains whistle at the edge of hearing, and through it all, our old friends, the dog walkers, continue their quiet rounds. They've come a long way from unlicensed street hounds. Now, some even wear polished boots and pressed collars. Appearances matter more than ever in this era, even for the ones holding the leashes. This is the time of moral reform and domestic pride, where cleanliness and order are considered signs of virtue. And as middle-class homes become ever more proper, dogs are expected to behave with a kind of polished dignity that mirrors their owners. Enter the Victorian dog walker, not just a handler, but a social educator. It's no longer enough to prevent barking. Now, the dog must be refined, demure, ideally capable of walking past a clattering tram without flinching, or heaven forbid sniffing, in public. You picture a walker named Edwin, tall and upright, who speaks to his canine charges in complete sentences. No, Montague, we do not chase hansoms, he murmurs, tapping his cane twice on the pavement for emphasis. His clients appreciate his formality. They refer to him in letters as an absolute gentleman of the leash. Dog walking becomes so codified, so embedded in the rhythms of polite society, that etiquette manuals begin to mention it. Some advise owners on the correct manner of hiring a dog walker. Others caution against allowing walkers to speak too familiarly with their employers, lest it encourage social overreach. It's all rather precious, but it speaks to how vital the role has become. Of course, this is also the age of contradictions. While dogs are pampered in some homes fed beef tea, allowed to nap on velvet footstools, strays are still beaten, put in the streets. Humane societies begin to form, pushing back against cruelty, and licensed walkers are among the first to align with them. After all, no one sees more of the city's back alleys and hidden cruelties than someone whose job is to wander it, every day with vulnerable companions. Historians still argue whether the walkers themselves were truly part of the reform movement, or simply beneficiaries of it. Some suggest they began reporting abuse because it was good for business cleaner. Safer streets meant more clients. Others believe many walkers genuinely loved their dogs and saw the shift in public sentiment, bays long overdue. You suspect it was probably both. Londoners have always had a knack for blending compassion with convenience. This is also the period when new inventions begin creeping into the walker's toolkit. Leather harnesses with brass fittings, extendable leads made from braided rope, foldable umbrellas with dog-sized coverings. Some walkers even carry specially made boots for their charges miniature, shoes to protect paws from the filth of factory runoff. You raise an eyebrow. Yes, little boots. And yes, some dogs hated them just as much as you'd expect. The city itself transforms. Parks expand. Gardens are enclosed. And public walking paths become more regulated. In many ways, this is a gift to the dog walkers, who now have safer, designated routes. But it also means more eyes on them. Strangers commenting on posture, technique, the size of the dog-to-walker ratio. You can't just bumble through the job anymore. You have to perform it. And so they do. Some walkers develop signature gaits. Some wear matching outfits with their dogs. A few even start taking portraits with their more photogenic clients' daguerreotypes that now sit faded and ghostly in dusty archives, showing men and women standing stiffly beside terriers in WAISTCOATS. Yes, you heard right. WAISTCOATS. And as the century marches on, so does the culture of dogs as children. Some owners begin referring to themselves not as masters, but as mamas and papas. The word fur baby isn't around yet, but you can feel it stirring in the way people write. Our dearest Bonbon has taken ill, or do pray for little Percy's cough returns with every fog. Dog walkers respond to this change by becoming softer, more attuned. They learn to read canine body language the way others read tea leaves. They sense emotional shifts in their four-legged charges, logging them mentally for the next conversation, bussed with the owner. One particularly gifted walker, it's said, could tell the precise moment a dog had outgrown its daily route and needed a change in scenery. He called it bored paw syndrome. And still they keep walking through Hyde Park in springtime, dodging bouncing children and startled pigeons, along the riverbanks where barges hiss and dogs lean over to sniff brine, down cobblestone alleys where the scent of meat pies mixes with chimney smoke. always moving, always adapting. You walk beside them now, trailing just behind Edwin as he tips his hat to a passing governess and turns onto a tree-lined street. His dogs follow in step, tails swaying like pendulums. Behind every leash is a story. Behind every bark, 1,000 quiet observations. And behind every walker, a city just trying to keep its many moving parts from unraveling. You don't notice at first. When the gas lamps flicker and the air sharpens, it happens gradually, as all big changes do. Now it's the early 20th century, and the world is on the cusp of collapsing and rebuilding all at once. War is on the horizon, but before it hits, London lives in a strange moment of optimism and tension. Electricity hums through the streets, telegrams chatter like nervous birds, and dog walkers, yes, they're still here, tread forward, as if nothing's changed, or at least as if they're determined not to let it show. This is a time of great social shuffle. The old class lines blur, slightly, and domestic workers gain a new kind of fluidity in society. Licensed dog walkers, once treated with soft condescension, now enjoy a touch more dignity. Some even run small businesses, operating as dog agencies, advertising in the backs of newspapers with modest flair. Dependable handler, Kensington area, specializing in nervous breeds. It's the golden age of postcards, too, and you spot a few with cheerful sketches. A man in a bowler hat, walking for hounds, with umbrellas tied to their backs. Or a lady in lace gloves, holding a poodle like a baby. Beneath the jokes lies recognition that dog walker is no longer a shadowy figure slipping between streets. They've become part of the city's cultural imagination. Of course, the Great War changes everything. When men go off to fight, women step in to fill roles of every kind: factory worker, train guard, munitions packer, and yes, dog walker. You walk now beside Margaret, boots laced tight, hair pinned severely beneath her cap. She handles the dogs, of families who've lost sons, husbands, brothers. Some of these dogs wait at the door each day, expecting the wrong footsteps. Margaret doesn't speak much, but she knows their stories. Dog walking becomes a form of quiet resistance. Even in blackout conditions, dogs must stretch their legs. You imagine her walking under a veiled moon, the city shuttered and uncertain, yet the leash in her hand steady. There's something deeply comforting about the predictability of pets when the rest of the world is breaking. Historians still debate whether walkers during wartime took on more than just canine care. Some suggest they smuggled messages under the collars of terriers, or ferried small parcels through enemy-watched neighborhoods. The records are thin, but the rumors are persistent. And frankly, it sounds exactly like something a clever spaniel could pull off. After the war, everything's different. London limps through the 1920s, wounded but stylish. The jazz age brings a bounce back into the city's step, and dog culture shifts again. Lapdogs become fashionable accessories for the elite, particularly in the West End. Walkers now sometimes operate as dog valets, expected to groom, accessorize, and even match the pet's appearance to the owner's outfit. One eccentric heiress demanded that her dog's collar match her handbag every week. Her walker, bless him, learned to dye leather. And then comes a new problem: automobiles. Suddenly, walkers must navigate moving metal boxes, each more reckless than the last. Dogs, of course, are equal parts curious and terrified. Walkers invent all sorts of strange tactics: reflective sashes, bells tied to collars. One man even swore by shouting "car" every 15 seconds like a human alarm. You might laugh, but city life has truly changed. There are more dangers, but also more dogs breeds imported from overseas, gifted by soldiers returning from far-off campaigns. Afghan hounds become a hit. French bulldogs begin appearing in barbershops and pubs. The dog walker is no longer just a servant. They're a guide to a world that's rapidly expanding and colliding. It's around this time that a curious offshoot appears. The dog psychologist, not a real one at least, not as we define it, but rather a walker who claims to understand dog moods, dreams, even memories. One self-proclaimed canine counselor in Soho wrote weekly pamphlets, "The Whining Mind, What Your Dog's Bark Reveals." You raise an eyebrow. He wore a monocle and offered private sessions. Been in a parlor above a tea shop. Naturally, still, for every charlatan, there are dozens of walkers simply doing the work. You see them in all weather, men and women in long coats, skirts hiked up, boots worn thin. They know every cracked cobblestone, every squeaky gate, every bakery where a friendly nod earns a scrap of meat pie for a wagging tail. They're anonymous, Ben records, but unforgettable in the memory of the city's dogs. You pause on a quiet lane in 1932. The fog has returned, but it's softer now, warmed by gaslight and the scent of bread. A woman walks by with a whippet on a braided lead. She nods to a policeman, tosses a biscuit to a passing terrier, and disappears into the London mist. Her presence as ordinary and as essential as the breath in your lungs. The sky grows darker, now not from clouds, but from the weight of what's come in. You're stepping into the 1940s, and London is about to endure one of its most terrifying chapters. The Blitz, dog walkers, still quietly persistent, become part of the city's strange, smoky choreography, moving through a war that turns every street into a potential ruin and every night into a question mark. You're alongside Ernest today. His coat is too thin, his boots too wide, but his grip on the leash is firm. The dog, with him a spaniel with one ear folded wrong seams, unbothered by the distant wail of sirens. Ernest isn't licensed anymore, not officially. Most licenses were suspended when the government redirected administrative labor to the war effort. But he still walks. He says it keeps the dogs calm, and maybe it does. Maybe it keeps him calm, too. During the Blitz, many pet owners evacuated. Some, heartbreakingly, euthanized their pets, fearing they wouldn't survive the bombings. but others stayed armed with them, their walkers. Every morning, the walkers would assess their routes, not for mud or horse droppings, as in decades past, but for rubble, unexploded ordnance, and the charred skeletons of buildings. One walker reportedly carried a tinned gas mask, not for himself, but for the bulldog. He walked twice a day. Historians still argue whether dog walkers were truly essential workers or simply tolerated as a sentimental luxury. But for families whose children were sent to the countryside and whose homes shivered under nightly air raids, those dogs were often the last heartbeat of normalcy, and the person who walked them, a lifeline to what used to be. You imagine the darkness, literal and figurative, pressing in around these walkers. Streetlights were off, maps were unreliable, landmarks had crumbled, and yet there they were, guiding spaniels through twisted alleys, crossing makeshift footbridges, nodding. 2 soldiers on leave, by a few dogs, traumatized by the booms and flashes, refused to leave their homes. Others ran wild. The walkers adapted. They brought treats. They hummed low lullabies. Some even wore bells on their ankles, so frightened dogs could follow the sound, like a breadcrumb trail. And when the bombs stopped, the city limped back to its routines. Post-war, London was a strange mosaic, part ruined, part reborn. In the late 1940s and into the 1950s, a renewed appreciation for domesticity swept through the capital. Suburbs expanded, and with them the need for new dog-walking routes. Former city walkers moved to places like Croydon and Wimbledon, where they walked spaniels past prefab homes and ration shops. Now, dog walking wasn't just a job, it was, in some neighborhoods, a business. Some walkers printed leaflets offering door-to-door collection and pet message relay, whatever that meant. A few even operated on bicycles, riding slowly beside their canine clients, who jogged along like shaggy athletes in training. Picture it: tweed cap, wire basket, Labrador panting happily behind. In the 1950s, British television arrived, and with it, a new breed of fame. One walker in Notting Hill became something of a local celebrity when he began appearing on TV with his poodle clients. The dog gentleman, they called him. He spoke with a crisp accent and claimed dogs understood the BBC better than most. Toddlers, you smile, unsure if that was flattery or shade. This was also the era when licensed walkers began attending basic veterinary first aid classes, usually taught in church basements by women in floral blouses with terrifyingly detailed chalk diagrams. Walkers learned how to identify paw burns, soothe stomach aches, and, in at least one session, deliver emergency CPR to a pug. Did it work? The pug made it. The walker fainted. And amidst all this change, the walkers kept going. Through rationing, through housing shortages, through the strange food substitutes of the time, yes. Powdered eggs were real. They walked. They carried biscuits in their coat pockets. They mended broken leads with string and chewing gum. They read the morning paper while perched on park benches. Dogs curled around their feet like tired children. dog breeds too evolved with the era. Smaller, apartment-friendly dogs became more common. The cockapoo made its debut, heralding a whole age of designer dogs that gave walkers both new challenges and new vocabulary. Imagine having to explain to your elderly client that yes, her neighbor's labradoodle is real, and no, it's not a shag rug possessed by a demon. The post-war years were, in many ways, a period of quiet resilience, and nowhere was that more visible than in the tiny, daily act of walking a dog. You think of Ernest Agenaldo now, his coat patched, his steps slower, but the leash still hangs from his hand, and the spaniel a new one same earfold, same stubborn tail still trots loyally beside him. As they disappear into a light drizzle, you realize the walkers aren't just moving dogs. They're carrying stories of war, of peace, of change and continuity. And whether they knew it or not, they were also walking history itself. It's the 1960s now, and London pulses with color, sound, and something electric in the air. You can feel it in the sidewalks. The Beatles hum from storefronts, sweep past your knees, and somewheres there's someone's got a shaggy Afghan hound with a psychedelic bandana tied neatly around its neck. Welcome to the era of swinging London, where even the dogs seem to have opinions on fashion. Dog walkers in this decade move through a city of reinvention. The stiff collars of Edwardian formality are long gone. In their place, a casual cool that bows walkers to dress in corduroy, denim, and even tie-dye if they're brave enough. You're walking with Sandra now. She's 23, owns 4 records, and talks to every dog as if they're fellow housemates. She's not licensed in the old school, paper-stamped way. Those regulations faded by the mid-1950s, but she carries a laminated card declaring her a certified pet companion, issued by one of London's first private dog care associations. It's a new kind of professionalism. Dog walking is no longer just a trade for the servant class or the stubbornly traditional. It's a gig, a hustle, a vibe. Young people, especially students, pick up a few clients between philosophy lectures and protest marches. Some walkers begin to specialize. Nervous dogs, aggressive dogs, poodles only. Others market themselves as pet photographers on the side, offering moody portraits of dachshunds staring wistfully at canals. And yes, historians still argue whether this shift democratized the trade or diluted its dignity. Was this liberation, or just a new form of urban hustle? No one agrees. But what's certain is that the role began to fragment. You're no longer the dog walker, you're a service provider in a bustling, barking economy. Sandra's got a route through Camden that winds past pop-up galleries, underground jazz bars, and the occasional illegal ferret vendor. She knows where to stop for free water bowls and where to avoid the punk pub on Great Portland Street. For example, where dogs have been known to leave stickier than they arrived. You pause outside a record shop, and a bulldog sits beside you, listening intently to Bowie. Around the corner, another walker, Jack, has a Doberman in sunglasses. He says it's a political statement. You don't ask questions. The 60s don't like too many questions. But underneath the glitter and go-go boots, the city still has its quiet routines. Elderly walkers, survivors of ration books and blackout curtains, still walk the same paths they did in 1935. Some carry faded photographs in their wallets, dogs long gone, streets long renamed. They nod politely at the new crowd, but don't say much. Their history is quieter. As the 1970s roll in, inflation hits, rents rise, and the city grows a bit edgier. Walkers adjust. Some form cooperative informal alliances of trust, where one walker covers another's route during illness or protest-related arrest. Others begin printing signs. The leash line, pause and politics, Woof Weekly. They write columns on urban dog safety, public access rights, and the spiritual meaning of tail-chasing. One zine, published in 1976, insists that dogs are the only true anarchists left in the city. You're not sure whether to laugh or nod solemnly. By the 1980s, the word entrepreneur starts to pop up in places it never belonged before. Dog walkers begin branding themselves. Some wear matching jumpsuits. Others advertise doggy day tours of historic London, complete with souvenir paw print. One duo launches a short-lived TV show, Walkies with Wilma, featuring mild canine drama and fashion commentary. It is, naturally, cancelled in 6 episodes. But behind the silliness, things are evolving. Dog behaviorism becomes a science, professional. Associations begin forming, again not through the crown this time, but through councils, insurance companies, and voluntary codes of conduct. Sandra, now nearing 50, runs a dog-walking mentorship program. She teaches newcomers how to handle leash tangles, manage reactive dogs, and navigate city bureaucracy. There's even a light academic interest now. A doctoral thesis from the University of Kent examines urban peripatetics, the dog walker as Flainer. You read it twice, then decide you still prefer real dogs to theoretical ones, and still at dawn and dusk. Walkers move through the city, a quiet ballet of people and paws. Some wear headphones, others hum. Most just walk in silence, listening to the rhythm of claws on cobblestone and the muffled breath of a city, always one step ahead of being understood. Now we reach the edge of modernity. The 1990s and 2000s bring mobile phones, GPS tracking, and apps that promise to Uberize the walking world. You've entered a space where dog walking is no longer invisible. It's reviewed, rated, and yet, somewhere in Hackney, someone still walks a mutt at 6 a.m. with a thermos of tea, and no need for digital praise. You've come far from soot-covered cobbles to satellite-tracked strolls. You've met footmen in powdered wigs, students, bill bottoms, and anarchists with Yorkshire Terriers. Through plague and blitz, boom and bust, London's dog walkers have endured, and now, in the gentle hush that follows this long, strange walk, we slow our pace for one last time. The city is soft now, quiet. Street lamps glow like sleepy candles, and the wind carries only the lightest scent of jasmine and yesterdays. Rain, you take one more step slower than the last, and your breath matches the slow rhythm of your walking companion beside you. The dog doesn't tug, doesn't pause, just walks, perfectly content, as if it too knows the story is coming to a close. You pass a bakery window, fogged from the inside, with a single croissant resting behind glass. Further down, a man dozes on a stoop, a spaniel curled at his feet, both lost to dreams. Your shoes tap gently on the pavement, but even the city's heartbeat has quieted. This walk, like all the others before it, isn't really about the distance or the destination. It's about presence, routine, the quiet companionship of another creature's needs, pulling you gently back to earth. No matter the century, no matter the chaos, this simple act has always remained. You reach a bench and sit. The leash slackens. The dog lies down, and the clouds drift like slow thoughts above your head. Tomorrow, someone else will walk this path. Maybe in sneakers, maybe in boots, maybe in silence. But they'll carry something with them, the echo of all those steps before. Close your eyes now. Let the cobblestones fade. Let the barking hush to a whisper. And let the story of London's unlikely guardians, their boots worn thin, their pockets full of biscuits, carry you gently into sleep and pull script sweet dreams.